The day started like any other for Elvis Presley. The sun was just peeking over the hills, casting a warm glow over Graceland. But inside the mansion, there was a storm brewing. Elvis was fed up. Fed up with the formulaic movies that trapped him like a caged animal. Fed up with the lackluster songs that did nothing for his soul. And most of all, fed up with feeling like he was just going through the motions. He slammed his fist on the table, sending his coffee cup flying. "This has got to stop," he growled, more to himself than to anyone else. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, stood in the doorway, his eyes wide with surprise. "Elvis, what's going on? You okay?" Elvis turned to face him, his eyes burning with a mix of frustration and determination. "Colonel, I'm done. I can't keep making these same movies over and over. I'm not a machine, and I'm not some cookie-cutter star. I'm Elvis Presley, and I need to do more. I need to feel alive again." Colonel Parker's face fell. He knew Elvis was serious, and deep down, he knew Elvis was right. The movies had become a treadmill, churning out the same plots and songs, and even the loyal fans were starting to notice. But the Colonel had built an empire around Elvis's image, and the thought of changing it was daunting. "Elvis, I understand your frustration, but we have a system that works. These movies keep you in the public eye, and they bring in a steady stream of income. We can't just abandon that," the Colonel argued, his voice tinged with desperation. Elvis shook his head. "It's not just about money, Colonel. It's about my art, my soul. I need to create, to perform, to connect with people again. I've been hiding behind a screen for too long, and I'm ready to step out and be Elvis again." The Colonel sighed, knowing that this was a battle he couldn't win. "Okay, Elvis, I hear you, but what do you want to do? What's your plan?" Elvis's eyes lit up with a spark of excitement. "I want to do a TV special. Something raw, something real. No more scripted lines, no more fake songs. Just me, my guitar, and the music that made me who I am. I want to remind people why they fell in love with Elvis Presley in the first place." The Colonel nodded slowly, a small smile creeping onto his face. "All right, Elvis, let's do it. But it's going to be a challenge. The networks might not be keen on a comeback special, especially after the way your recent movies have been received. But I'll make some calls, and we'll see what we can do." Elvis stood up, a sense of renewed purpose coursing through him. "Thank you, Colonel. This is what I needed to hear. We're going to make history, and we're going to do it our way." As the two men walked out of the room, the air seemed to crackle with energy. Elvis felt a weight lifting off his shoulders, and for the first time in years he felt truly alive. The road ahead was uncertain, but he was ready to take it head-on. The phone calls started coming in almost immediately. The Colonel's connections were powerful, and soon the wheels were in motion. Elvis began rehearsing, pouring his heart and soul into every note, every lyric, every movement. He was determined to show the world that he was still the king, and he was ready to reclaim his throne. The date was set for December 3rd, 1968. The venue was NBC Studios in Burbank, California. The show would be broadcast live, and the stakes were higher than ever. Elvis knew that this was his moment to shine, to prove that he was more than just a Hollywood star. He was a legend, and he was coming back. The night of the special. The studio was packed with an eager audience. The cameras were rolling, and the tension was palpable. As Elvis walked onto the stage, guitar in hand, the crowd erupted in cheers. He looked out at the sea of faces, feeling a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was his comeback. He took a deep breath and began to play. The first notes of Guitar Man filled the air, and Elvis was transported back to the early days, when he was just a kid from Tupelo with a dream. He poured every ounce of his passion into the performance, and the audience was spellbound. As the night wore on, Elvis performed a mix of old favorites and new material, each song more powerful than the last. He was in his element, and the crowd was eating it up. By the end of the show, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Elvis had done it. He had come back, and he had done it in style. The next day, the reviews were glowing. Critics praised Elvis's raw energy, his stage presence, and his ability to connect with the audience. The special was a resounding success, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter in Elvis's career. He was no longer just a movie star. He was a living legend, and he was back with a vengeance. But the journey was far from over. Elvis knew that this was just the first step in a long road ahead. He was ready to face whatever challenges came his way, because he had found something that he had lost for a while, his true self, and that was the most important thing of all. Elvis Presley's career in the late 1960s was in a rut. He was churning out lightweight musical comedies and singing unimpressive soundtracks from those movies. Meanwhile, the music scene was evolving with artists like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Jimi Hendrix leading the way. Elvis seemed to be out of touch, and his films were no longer drawing big crowds. In June 1968, Elvis was set to perform a music special for NBC. He was nervous because he knew this could make or break his career. He hadn't performed live since 1961 and hadn't been on TV since 1960. This time, he needed to remind everyone why he was once a huge star. Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, wanted to do a standard Christmas special, but Elvis had other plans. He wanted something that would make people take notice. He wanted to return to his roots as a rock and roll rebel, not continue making forgettable movies and songs. Elvis took control of the special and worked closely with producer Steve Binder. He opened with a close-up of himself snarling, "If you're looking for trouble, you came to the right place." The camera then pulled back to reveal a lean, energetic Elvis in a black leather suit. He was back to his rebellious best, the man who had once set the music world on fire. The special featured Elvis playing his classic songs with his old bandmates, telling funny stories, and showing off his trademark hip-swiveling moves. He even made a joke about his movie career, saying, "All I could move was my little finger," while performing Hound Dog. He also sang a soulful Love Me Tender, a bluesy One Night, and a gospel song, proving his versatility as a singer. The special was a huge success. It was watched by 42% of the viewing audience, making it the most watched program of the year. Critics praised Elvis, saying it was like watching a man rediscover his strength and charisma. Elvis realized how much he missed performing live, and decided to return to the studio to record a new album and start touring again. However, before he could do that, he had to finish the last few movies on his contract. One of these was Charo, a Western film released in 1969. It was a straightforward Western with no songs, which was a change from the musicals he had been doing. Elvis played Jesse Wade, a man seeking revenge on an outlaw gang that had framed him for their crimes. Charo had a strong cast and good production values, but the script was filled with typical Western dialogue. Critics weren't particularly impressed, but the film had a solid look and sound, and it was a step in the right direction for Elvis. It showed that he could handle a serious role, and that he was willing to take on different types of projects. After Charo, Elvis was ready to focus on his music and live performances. He had reclaimed his place as a rock and roll icon, and he was determined to keep that momentum going. Elvis's movie career was winding down, and it seemed like the roles he was getting were a far cry from the ones he truly desired. His last few films, however, showed a different side of him, one that was more in line with the kind of actor he wanted to be. One of these films was The Trouble with Girls, a movie set in 1927 that was actually planned much earlier, with different actors like Glenn Ford and Dick Van Dyke. By the time it was made, it had been retooled to fit Elvis, and surprisingly, it turned out to be one of the better films he did in his later years. In The Trouble with Girls, Elvis plays Walter Hale, a manager of a traveling entertainment show called a Chautauqua. The Chautauqua is like a mix of a circus and a theater, where people come to see music, comedy, and lectures. Walter brings this show to a small town in Iowa, where a murder has just happened. The town is in an uproar, and Walter finds himself trying to solve the mystery while also dealing with the performers in his show. One of the main storylines is about Walter and Charlene, played by Marlon Mason. Charlene is part of the show, and she's trying to organize the performers into a union. This leads to some fun and sometimes heated arguments between her and Walter. Despite the tension, there's also a romantic spark between them. Marlon Mason, who played Charlene, remembered that working with Elvis was a joy. She said that Elvis was always professional and worked hard, even in scenes that were supposed to be funny. There's a scene where she's yelling at him, and he just started laughing, which made the scene even funnier. The movie also features other talented actors like Vincent Price, Edward Andrews, and John Carradine, who add a lot of depth to the story. The film has a few songs, but not as many as Elvis's usual movies. This actually worked in its favor, as it allowed the focus to be more on the story and the characters. The Trouble with Girls was a hit with some critics, who praised its charm and the performances. The New York Times, which had often criticized Elvis's movies, said that the film was charming, and that the plot, while not the strongest part, didn't matter too much because the movie was so enjoyable in other ways. However, not everyone was a fan. Variety, a trade magazine, thought that the movie was a bit of a mess, and that Elvis seemed lost without his usual song-filled formula. Despite the mixed reviews, The Trouble with Girls showed that Elvis could still deliver a good performance and that he was capable of more than just singing and dancing in a formulaic plot. It was a step in the right direction, even if it came too late to change the course of his movie career. Elvis's final film, Change of Habit, was another step in the right direction. This movie was originally supposed to be a vehicle for Mary Tyler Moore, a popular TV star at the time. But when Elvis came on board, he became the lead, and Mary Tyler Moore played a supporting role. In the film, Elvis is Dr. John Carpenter, a doctor working in the inner city. Mary Tyler Moore, along with other actors like Barbara McNair and Jane Elliott, play nuns who are also working in the community. The movie deals with the different approaches they take to helping people, with Elvis's character being more hands-on and the nuns focusing on spiritual support. The director, William A. Graham, worked with Elvis to improve his acting, especially in more subtle scenes. Elvis was good at comedy and action, but he sometimes struggled with more emotional or romantic scenes. Graham used techniques from the famous acting school, the Neighborhood Playhouse, to help Elvis get more comfortable with these types of roles. Change of Habit was a different kind of movie for Elvis, and it showed that he was capable of taking on more serious and nuanced roles. However, it also marked the end of his film career. After Change of Habit, Elvis focused more on his music and live performances, which were more successful and fulfilling for him. These last few movies, especially The Trouble with Girls and Change of Habit, demonstrated that Elvis had more to offer as an actor than he was ever allowed to show. They were a glimpse into what might have been, if he had been given more creative freedom earlier in his career. Even though it was too late for a major comeback in film, these movies are a testament to Elvis's talent and his desire to be more than just a singing star. Elvis Presley was in a tricky spot. The Colonel, his manager, had a strict way of doing things. One day, the Colonel called Elvis's acting coach, Sonny, into his office. He warned Sonny not to push Elvis toward winning an Oscar, saying, "We ain't got no tuxedos." This meant that the Colonel didn't want Elvis to take the movies in a different direction, even if it could make him a better actor. Despite this, Elvis continued to improve his acting. He was working on a film called Change of Habit, which was more serious than his usual movies. Elvis was enjoying this new challenge, but the Colonel was always watching, making sure everything stayed the same. In Change of Habit, Elvis played a doctor working with nuns in a poor neighborhood. The film had a few songs, but it was more focused on the story and characters. Elvis worked hard and was very polite to everyone on set. He would often play his guitar and sing old favorites like Hound Dog to entertain the crew during breaks. The film also starred Mary Tyler Moore, a popular TV actress. Their romantic scenes were handled carefully because Mary's character was a nun, and Elvis's character didn't know this until the end. This added a layer of tension and made the story more interesting. Change of Habit was a step in the right direction for Elvis. It showed that he could handle more serious roles and that he was aware of important social issues. However, the movie wasn't a big hit. By the time it was released, Elvis fans were more interested in his live performances and new recordings. After Change of Habit, Elvis's movie career came to an end. He focused on live shows and recording. In 1970, a documentary called Elvis, That's the Way It Is, was released. It showed Elvis preparing for a concert and performing on stage. The film highlighted his dedication and hard work, and it was a hit with fans. 2 years later, another documentary, Elvis on Tour, came out. This film captured Elvis's evolving style as he became more of a showman. By this time, he was known for his sequined outfits and grand performances, but he still delivered powerful songs like Bridge Over Troubled Water. The 1970s were a great time for music, with many iconic albums being released. Elvis kept up with the times, releasing a box set of his greatest hits and a country album that was one of his best. However, his lifestyle became more indulgent, and he struggled with weight gain and prescription drug use. In 1973, Elvis performed a historic concert in Hawaii, which was broadcast worldwide via satellite. Elvis, Aloha from Hawaii, was a huge success, and the album reached #1 on the charts. But it also marked the beginning of the end for Elvis's career. He continued to tour, but his health declined and his performances became less consistent. Despite his struggles, Elvis never lost his amazing voice or his ability to connect with his audience. Even in his final years, he could still draw large crowds and deliver a great show. However, the stress and drug use took a toll on him, and he became distant from some of his closest friends. In 1977, Elvis Presley passed away, leaving behind a legacy that continues to inspire generations. His music, his movies, and his live performances all contribute to the legend of the King of Rock and Roll. Elvis Presley, the King of Rock and Roll, left a lasting impact on the music world and popular culture. His early work, especially, is a testament to his talent and influence. Despite the scandalous stories that emerged near the end of his life, Elvis's legacy as a pioneering artist and entertainer remains solid. Elvis's movie career, though sometimes criticized, also added to his legend. He starred in several films, from light-hearted musicals to more serious roles. One of his last chances to shine on the big screen was the offer to star in A Star is Born with Barbra Streisand. However, his manager, Colonel Parker, nixed the idea, thinking the role of a struggling singer might damage Elvis's image. Even though Elvis's films might not have always been the best, they still showed his charm and charisma. Some of his movies, like Jailhouse Rock, are now considered classics. His performances in these films, combined with his music, helped shape the rock and roll era. Elvis's influence extends far beyond his lifetime. Artists like Bruce Springsteen have covered his songs, and his music continues to resonate with new generations. Despite the challenges and controversies, Elvis Presley's contributions to music and entertainment are undeniable. He remains a true giant of the modern era, and his legacy will continue to inspire and entertain for many years to come.